Welcome to New York Got Game.
Welcome back to another edition of New York Got Game. Dexter Henry here. Interesting last week for the New York Knicks. They are not playing for the NBA Cup title because they got bounced by the Hawks and Trae Young, which all Knicks fans hate. We have so much to talk about this week about the Knickerbockers. It's going to be a Knickerbockers episode, and I got a great guest to talk all about New York basketball. Let's do it. Let's get right to it. So Wednesday night at the Garden, it was a frustrating game for the Knicks against the Hawks. Some fans over the past few days, they've had concern after the team was bounced from the NBA Cup, and the concern didn't stem from the fact that the Knickerbockers lost, but how they lost, being out-hustled on the glass and giving up 22 offensive rebounds. But now the team is 26 games into the season, but who is this Knicks team? What are they about? Does the roster need help? What's their identity? These are all questions that we're going to discuss with one of the best when it comes to breaking down Knicks hoops. Representing Knicks Film School, my guy, Ben Ritholz, joins me now. Benji, what's going on?
How you doing, Dex? Great to be here again.
I'm doing good. Good to have you here again. It's back. How has everything been going for you? Cold weather in New York, holiday season. Have you been surviving?
Freezing cold in New York. Everyone's getting sick, but we're hanging in. We're doing all right.
Just trying to do all right, trying to be healthy. But we're going to talk about these Knicks, right?
Let's
the 26 games, which where we are with the Knicks right now. Let's go back a second, right? Let's start with the ugly loss to the Hawks. Because it was ugly. It was not good. The fans felt a way about it, and the Knicks get eliminated from the NBA Cup last week. What did you learn about the team in that loss? Did you learn anything about them? And is Atlanta just a bad matchup for the Knicks, or are there larger concerns here when you look at this Knickerbocker squad?
I think a lot of it comes down to the matchup. Dyson Daniels has given Jalen Brunson a uniquely difficult challenge defensively. He is one of the best defensive guards in the NBA. His physicality really has bothered Brunson, and the Knicks have been kind of unable to free Brunson, which obviously, like, his ability to break down a defense and create shots for himself and others is key to the offense. So I think the Hawks, the size on the wings around Dyson Daniels at the point of attack, and then Daniels' defense on Brunson, does make it a uniquely difficult matchup for the Knicks. That said, I think it shows some difficult trends the Knicks have been dealing with now in the last few games in terms of getting hurt on the offensive glass a little bit, which they started the season great on that side of the ball. Now they're starting to get hurt on the glass. And then in terms of sometimes switchable physical defenses can bother this offense that's been so good early. But we've seen a few teams, though, the really switchable physical defensive teams can get the Knicks out of their games. So they're working out the kinks on that end a little bit.
Yeah, working out the kinks in them. This is one thing I think that's going to come up as the season goes longer, right? Is there any concern about Atlanta if you see them down the road because of what they pose with their length, with their athleticism? You talked about Dyson Daniels, who's had Jalen Brunson in the torture chamber thus far early on. Are you concerned about seeing them down the road, or do you think it's a situation where the Knicks can figure out how to beat a team like Atlanta?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's ways they'll look at the film and obvious ways to improve. I think the screening needs to get better specifically. Cat and Brunson, as great as they've been together as a tandem, you look at the numbers, they're the best pick-and-roll tandem in the league. You watch the games, you see how much their gravity, when they interact together, can totally warp a defense and create great shots for them and the other guys on the team. But, man, sometimes when you have a defender like Daniels at the point of attack who's so relentless, you just got to hit him on the screen. And Hartenstein last year was a guy who his whole purpose on offense basically was to free Jalen Brunson. Obviously, Cat does so many other things, but sometimes point A, right at the beginning of a possession, hit somebody with the screen, let Brunson get free a little bit, and that opens up things. So I think that's the first adjustment they can make. They see Atlanta down the road. I think they will make that adjustment.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. A good point there on Isaiah Hartenstein, who his numbers with Jalen Brunson pick and roll were so good because of exactly what you mentioned right there, just hitting people on the screen. Now, on defense, this is what fans are going to talk about. Knicks have had issues on defense this season when it comes to defending the point of attack and also protecting the rim, right? That's been really a tough part for them this year. In terms of on-the-ball defense, Mikal Bridges, he's not been an elite on-the-ball defender as advertised or what we've seen him to be in the past. What do you see as lacking with Bridges right now in his defense this season? Do you think that he can turn it around, or is he regressed defensively and the Bridges that we once knew on defense is just gone?
Yeah, I think, look, we just watched the end of that Magic game, and the Knicks pulled out a win. What he did to Jalen Suggs in that game, especially in the first half, navigating screens, getting through, getting skinny so that he can stay on Suggs' hip and contest every floater he took. That's the Mikal Bridges the Knicks need. That's the one they thought they were getting when they traded all those picks for him. It's great to see that he still has it in there. And I would even say over the last couple weeks now, We've seen a better Mikal Bridges defensively, a more aggressive Mikal Bridges defensively, a more disruptive Mikal Bridges defensively, and the length that he has, his ability to navigate screens that we know is in there because we've seen it. That was really good to see in this Orlando game, and I think, again, increasingly over the last couple of weeks. So I think it's going to get better, and I think it's still in there for him. It's just a matter, maybe it was, the increased offensive load he had in Brooklyn, which kind of got him out of that defensive mindset. Maybe he's still figuring out his chemistry in the pick and roll with Cat. I think that's a real thing. They're still figuring things out, how to navigate their communication, how to make sure that they're calling out the screen properly, what's the coverage. I think all of that is part of kind of meshing as a defense. And I do think we're seeing the improvement that we're hoping for. And just something to monitor going forward. Like, can they get the Mikal Bridges who can be so disruptive on that end?
I'm glad you mentioned that, right, about just the chemistry and communication on defense, because that's something I've been trying to say. We talk about this so much on offense,
yes,
but that matters on that side too, right, the communication. What concerned me personally watching Mikal Bridges was how he was dying on screens, wasn't fighting over it. That wasn't the guy I saw before, but you mentioned the Magic game, Knicks' most recent game. We saw that from Mikal Bridges,
yeah,
and sometimes that comes with communication, and so things can take time. I know a lot of people have patience here in New York, but things can take time. Benji, in terms of rim protection, right, because that's another thing fans have been talking about with the team defensively, it sure looks like the Knicks could use Mitchell Robinson. They miss him there. But ESPN's Shams Charania reported on Thursday Robinson likely will not be cleared for team activities until late January at the earliest. Look, we know this, folks. Robinson health is always a concern. So my question here to you, Benji, is should the Knicks make a trade for a backup center sooner rather than later?
On the list of priorities that I have for the Knicks in terms of making a deal at some point this season with the limited assets they have, a backup wing is higher on that priority list than a backup center for me. You have potentially Mitchell Robinson coming back, but even more than that, like I think Precious Achiuwa is now back in the fold. He's had his moments. I mean, the team has performed very well with him on the floor thus far in a very small sample size. But he gives them a different element, the switchability, the versatility to play the 4 or the 5, play with Cat or without him. I'd like to see more of that and see how he kind of meshes with this team as we go forward in the season before we give up those limited assets for another center. Plus, Jericho Sims, I know he's now in the doghouse after a couple of poor performances. He's actually been one of the best rim protectors in the league this season by the numbers. He's really improved in his verticality, blocking shots, contesting. So even if Precious doesn't work out, or you want to play Precious more at the 4, I'm okay letting Jericho run on the floor for 10, 12 minutes a night. I feel pretty good about that, even though he's had his issues of late. So, again, considering the limited assets they have, it's going to be difficult to make more than one move if they make any. I'd like a wing with the minutes that these guys have been playing because they don't have that depth at the wing. I'd like to see another wing come in before I see a backup center.
All right, we're going to get back to that on trades with the wing. Good points there. We'll see what happens with Mitchell Robinson. Now, in terms of defense overall, right, the Knicks have gotten to the middle of the pack-ish on defense, right? They were in the 20s right now. Heading into the Orlando game, they were at 17th in terms of defensive rating. Have you seen enough defensive improvement? Because there has been improvement this month. They have moved up in terms of defensive rating. Have you seen enough improvement from the Knicks on the defensive end to believe that they can clean up things on the side of the ball? Or do you view this as there are systemic issues that are holding them back from their true potential of how good they can be defensively?
I would say a little bit of both. I don't think this team has the same defensive ceiling as they had last year with a guy like Hartenstein in the fold. I think the goal, though, is different. I think because of the offensive firepower that they now have, and that's been demonstrated so far, they've been top 3 in the league in offense for basically the duration of the season. You just want to get to like that 10 to 13 kind of range, and you hope that the offense gets to a level where you can still outperform teams over the course of a game because of your offensive ability, and then your ability to get stops enough, right, to stay in those games. So I do think there's systemic issues. When your best 2 scorers are Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson, you have 2 below-average defenders on the floor at any given time. That's going to be a challenge. Now, they've tried to insulate them with these great wings defensively, and I think you're starting to see that come to fruition. But those are systemic issues. And that said, I think they have cleaned things up. I think they've experimented with different coverages with Cat. He's been in drop. He's been up at the level. He's been blitzing. Now they're kind of gone back to the drop a little bit more. They're still trying to problem solve and figure it out. But as the communication improves, these guys play more together. I think you're seeing the improvement. They're forcing more difficult shots. They're forcing more misses at the rim. OG is starting to fly around and make plays as he becomes more confident with what everybody else on the floor is doing. So I think it's a little bit of both, but I think we can be encouraged by the improvement they made on that end so far.
Do you think, I'm encouraged by what we've seen on this end for them. I think they've been pretty much a top 6 defense in terms of rating this month, the month of December. Do you think they can get to that, you said, a 10 to 13 range? We know if you're usually at least a top 11 to 12 defense, that bodes well for you in terms of truly competing for a championship. Do you think they can get to that range in terms of defensive rating?
Yeah, I do think they can get there. Again, I think it's just a matter of finding the right coverages and then lineups too. I think that they're still figuring out who plays best together, who can support Cat the most in terms of his defensive ability and where he struggles, but also where he's good. Like the rebounding's been incredible from Cat. And you can only defend if you can get the rebound at the end of the possession, right? And Atlanta game notwithstanding, which was a bad performance on the boards, they've generally been good on the boards, and Cat's the main reason why. I mean, he cleans up. So how do you support him where he struggles, and what's the coverage that best kind of disguises or covers up for the things he struggles at defensively? I think they're still finding those solutions, and I do think that with more time together, Mikal Bridges now, especially now seeming to get more into form as who we think he could be on the ball, I think they can climb into that 10 to 13 range, absolutely.
All right. See? Positivity for the Knicks on defense. Positivity is what we're talking about. Now, despite the struggles on defense, you mentioned this offense, top 3 offense for the Knicks. They've been there pretty much the entire season, like you mentioned. What do you attribute their success offensively to, and do you think it can be sustained? Can this team be a top 3 offense or even the best offense in the league, which they held that spot for a couple of games? Do you think come the end of the season, Knicks have the best offense in the NBA?
Absolutely. I do. And Boston's, it may end up too, because Boston can really score the ball.
Yeah.
I think Cleveland, who as great as they've been, I don't think they have quite the same offensive ceiling as the Knicks have. Boston might. But I think the main reason is because you have these 2 guys. We talked about what they're missing on defense. You have Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns leading your offense. These are 2 of the best offensive players in basketball right now. Incredibly efficient, incredible gravity. Both of them are just top shooters. And when those 2 interact in action, we talked about it a little bit, like that pick and roll, even though I think there's stuff to clean up in terms of the screening and when Karl-Anthony Towns decides to roll, when he decides to pop. Like you see some times where they kind of crash into each other on the pick and roll. Like it's not even perfect yet, and yet it's the most powerful duo in the league in terms of pick and roll efficiency. So talk about a starting point for your offense. And then look, Bridges, as much as he struggled early on with the shot, he's starting to make some threes. He's been one of the best corner three-point shooters in the league all season. OG Anunoby, recent struggles, but he's overall shot the ball great. Josh Hart is now shooting the ball well from 3. So you surround these 2 guys with all the shooters, and then Deuce McBride, when he's in the game, is just a knockdown shooter. So it's really hard to deal with. When you have that pick and roll, you have to send help, and then you have these shooters around them. It is difficult to navigate for a defense. And as the Knicks continue to get better, clean stuff up again on the offensive end, the screening gets better, and the cuts get cleaner, and like the spacing gets pristine, like I think it can be if they're intelligent about the way they run their actions. The offense should be dynamite, and I think we've seen that so far. It can only get better too.
Yeah, I think what's scary is the fact of something you just mentioned there, how good they've been, and Bridges has just started shooting the ball really well. He's 7 of 11 from the field in their most recent game against Orlando, and you said OG Anunoby has kind of come a little bit down to earth. Josh Hart, career year shooting the ball. They're still not even fully clicking on all cylinders, and they're still top 3, which is scary. So I think Knicks fans should be encouraged about that. Now, one of the things that we saw against Atlanta was lack of shot creation, because I talked about how Dyson Daniels had Jalen Brunson in that torture chamber, right? And when he was getting guarded, locked up pretty much, who else was there for the Knicks to create a shot? Do you think the Knicks have enough shot creation options on this team for a deep playoff run, or is there a pressing need to acquire another shot creator? Maybe that's in the form of the backup wing you were talking about. Do you think this is something they need to do in terms of getting another shot creator on this roster? It's
a great question. It's one I've actually struggled with a little bit, because I also think one of the things the Knicks thought they were getting in Mikal Bridges was a secondary creator. That was really the role he played on Brooklyn. And so we were hoping we got this like combination of Phoenix Bridges and Brooklyn Bridges, right? Where like you get the defense from Phoenix that he played, you get the offensive creation ability that he showed in Brooklyn, and you kind of bring that all together. And that was the guy they thought was worth all these picks, right? Hasn't quite shown the off-the-bounce ability that we thought he would. A little hesitant to get into the lane, hasn't drawn any shooting fouls at all. Again, tonight against Orlando, showed a little bit more, got to the rim a little bit, especially in transition. That's great to see. as he rounds into form, I think that really, it hinges on that, is like, where is Bridges as a creation option for this team? If he's what he's been so far, they may need a little more juice. If he can become more of what we think he can be, I think they're just fine the way they are. Brunson obviously is, as the engine, runs some stuff through Karl-Anthony Towns at the elbow. He's not a traditional creator. He's not going to run you a pick and roll. But man, he demands a lot of help in that paint, and the way he's passed the ball from the standstill this year, hitting cutters with the backhands and over the head and everything that he's been doing, that's another kind of engine of offense that they can use a little bit more, I think. So you combine Cat's ability there, Brunson being who he is, and then hopefully Bridges coming into his own. I think there's enough.
And I think with Bridges coming into his own, right, Benji? I had Andrew Solop here last week, and he said, oh, they need him to be Brooklyn Bridges. And I don't agree with that. I don't think they need him to be that guy. I agree with the part of what you said. Can he be somewhere between Brooklyn and Phoenix?
Yeah.
You definitely want the defense from Phoenix, right?
Yep.
You definitely want that part. Could he be, I don't know, 50% of what you saw from him offensively in Brooklyn? I think that would get the job done. But I do agree, maybe he's the shot creator the Knicks need. Maybe that's just an addition with him being a little bit more comfortable here in the Knicks offense. Now, I've got to ask you this, because we're recording this on December 15th. Trade window opens up. 86 players in the league now could be traded. Mm-hmm. This doesn't impact the Knicks as much because it only affects Campaign, right, who can now be traded. Precious Achiuwa can't be traded until January 15th. But I'm going to ask you this. You mentioned the need for a backup wing. So when it comes to names on that, what players do you think the Knicks should target to elevate their roster, particularly for that backup wing position?
There's a name I love. Now, Knicks fans probably know this, the educated ones, as Knicks fans are very educated.
Yes.
It's very hard to match salaries. Because of where the Knicks are salary-wise, salary cap-wise, they have to match exactly if they're going to make any trade. So that kind of makes any trade difficult, and you have to kind of find the right salary slot to make any kind of deal. A name that I love, and we just saw this team deal Dennis Schroeder early because they want to tank, as it were, to the Brooklyn Nets. They don't want to win any more games. They've been too feisty. I look at Dorian Finney-Smith as the name I love because what he gives you, he's not a too expensive a contract, and Knicks can figure out whether it's a Mitch or a Precious, or they can kind of combine and figure out how to make that deal. He gives you versatility at the wing. He shot the ball well this year. He's an excellent defensive player. He's a huge wing, so he can play 4, 5, even if you wanted to in a pinch, or 3. He brings a toughness, and I think just like in terms of how small the Knicks are around Cat right now, even though Josh Hart does his best to be a big rebounder at 6'4", the team's not particularly big. Dorian Finney-Smith gives you some size, can spread the floor and shoot off the passes from Brunson or from Campaign or whoever he's playing with. I think he's a name to look for.
I like that name. It's not a sexy name.
No.
I know it's not going to get the Knicks fans excited here, but I think it's a good name. And my only concern is the Knicks would have to go back to trading with the Nets again. Yes. And there might be a New York tax. That's all I'm saying. There might be a New York tax here where the Nets might want, let's say, a little bit more of a sweetener to the deal to get it done.
They just want all our picks. I'll just take every single one of them.
I think that would happen. Although I do think it's a good name. It fits the need. He's somebody who can help, like you said, in terms of defense. He's got some size. He's been playing some 5 at some points this year with Nick Claxton. We saw it in the Knick game. The first Knick game at the Garden, he played a bit of 5.
And look, he'll be available, right? Like the Nets are going to be in a fire sale. So, I would love to say Cam Johnson, who would fit beautifully on this team and has played with Bridges. And
but the money is
he's expensive, so it's going to be very difficult to not include someone you already kind of need in the trade to get someone like Cam Johnson. Maybe a little unrealistic, but maybe. You could dream big.
No, DFS, that's a good one. We'll see if that can happen. Maybe the Knicks and Nets make another trade. They've only made one trade since 1983. Maybe we get 2 in one calendar year.
The floodgates have opened.
The floodgates have opened. There we go. Last thing for me, Benji, before I get you out of here. Okay, we're through 26 games. My major question with this team is, what is their identity? So how would you define the Knicks' identity right now as their team? Are they closer to being a legitimate title contender, or are they just they're a solid playoff team? Where do you have this team right now, and how do you define their identity?
I don't think they're a contender yet, the way they've played. I think they're building towards it. I think if you just want to see the improvement on you make a sea change like they've made, and we talked about it a little bit before we went on air.
Yeah.
Karl-Anthony Towns changes not just like your personality, changes everything about how you play on both ends. You have to protect him defensively. They didn't have to deal with that at all last year with Isaiah Hartenstein. They haven't had to deal with that at all since Tibbs came in. They've had a center anchor on defense through the entirety of the Tibbs era. This is a totally different kind of center. but he also changes everything about the way you play offensively. He opens the entire floor up in a way the Knicks have never had a center quite like Karl Anthony Towns. It takes time for a team that made a change like that, as late as they did, right before training camp, to come together and find an identity on both sides of the ball. I don't think they have an identity yet. I don't think they've found that. I think they're right now a very good team despite the fact that they haven't found that. And I think you got to give them more time to develop into the contender I think they can become. I wouldn't say they're there yet. I think the defense has to get to a place where you're confident they can string together stops late in the game. I don't know if we're there yet. And I think the offense needs to become even more explosive. And I think they will get there soon. I think that's coming. The defensive issues we've talked about, those need to be worked out. That's the barrier for me to contender status. But we got to give it some more time as again, they're working out the kinks. They're learning each other. It does take a lot of time for a team as new as this Knicks team that's still trying to learn each other. Yeah,
and listen, I'm inclined to agree with you. I do not think they're a contender yet. I agree with you. Do I think they can get there? Yeah, we might have a different conversation about this, folks, in about 2 months. It's possible. But, everybody wants tomorrow yesterday.
OKC and Boston are so good. I mean, those two teams know exactly who they are right now. And, Cleveland's been great. I still like the matchup with the Knicks if we get to that point, but that's for a later time. But you look at the favorites in both conferences. Those teams are so good, and you have to pick them both in their respective conferences. And I don't think the Knicks right now are in that league. You watch OKC, what they just did to Houston, the way they can clamp you defensively. So it's going to take time to get to that level, but this team probably has the talent. And we add another roster move, hopefully, by the trade deadline and bring someone else in here who can help. They can get there. It's just going to take some time.
I'm in agreement with you. But, like I said, everybody wants tomorrow yesterday. There's no patience. This Knicks team was supposed to be 25-1, and they're 16-10. And, I think they're in a good position.
They are.
This is a good. The point you made there, they're 16-10. And both of us agree that they do not have an identity as a team right now. And you could say that's a bad thing, but I would also look at a little half glass full, folks. They're 16-10 without an identity, and they're working towards finding one. That should be encouraging.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there's a lot to be excited about here. I think the expectations can be the enemy of happiness for a fan. It's like when you go all in the way the Knicks have, the draft capital is mostly gone. The payroll is as high as it is. It's hard to take a lot of solace in a win against Orlando tonight the way they played. Or even the grinded out win, the two grinded out wins they had against Brooklyn. Like, those games don't feel great as a fan when you feel like this team should be blowing teams like that out. Not really how the NBA works, and also it's just, the expectations can ruin the joy for a fan. I think you're seeing a little bit of that with the response of Knicks fans to this team so far. But with patience, they are winning games. 16-10 is a good record. They're on pace for something like 50 wins. So, at the end of the day, the team's playing well enough, and as they continue to get better, watch out. I think there's a lot of potential there.
There you go. Optimism, positivity for the Knicks fans. That is Benjamin Ritholz. Check him out with Knicks Film School. Does a great job breaking it down. Benji, second time I had you on New York Got Game. Last time I had you during the playoffs. Now you're back during the regular season.
Love it.
You'll be back again.
Can't wait, man. This is a lot of fun. Always great to be on with you.
Always fun talking to you. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it, man. All right. Okay, so one good thing about the Knickerbockers when you think about the fact that they lost to the Atlanta Hawks is they got 3 days off before they played Orlando, so that was good. They got some practice time there, get the win against Orlando, improve to 16-10. Then they got another 3 days off before they go play what is going to be a game that Knicks fans had circled on their calendar on Thursday as they travel to Minneapolis, and they will battle the Timberwolves. Now, obviously, that's big. First time that Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo will face the Knicks in the regular season since the trade, and also Karl Anthony Towns making his return to Minnesota. So that should be a really fun matchup. Speaking of that matchup, this week on New York Got Game, Knicks Weekly Live, myself and Brian Fonseca, we will have the play-by-play voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves for television. My guy Michael Grady will be joining us to break down that matchup. That'll be Wednesday night at 7:30, so tap in with us for that one. Got to give a thank you to my guest for this week's episode, my guy Ben Ritholz, doing a great job breaking things down with the Knicks. As always, got to thank the people that make this possible. Editor, Catherine Cooper, my producer, Nicholas Federico, and Zachary Taub doing a great job with the directing. I'm Dexter Henry. We'll catch you next time on New York Got Game.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.